Alright guys, so we're gonna go over where we're at right now. So we got the TorqStorm Supercharger mounted, all the brackets. I have all the piping and intercooler work pretty much all done right now. We have the blow off valve and everything is set up, and I'm gonna show you something real quick. What I ended up doing is I ended up drilling and tapping a little nipple right here on the side of the intake underneath the throttle body, and that is going to go up to our blow off valve to feed the blow off valve. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. On the back of the intake and in the TorqStorm Supercharger instructions, it does tell you there's two ports on the back of the intake that you can use to feed a blow off valve or a boost gauge or whatnot. I did not want to do that because I was going to have to, one, add a T to that and then try to hook my blow off valve, the boost gauge, and the factory line all on that one nipple, and it was just kind of going to look like a Mongolian mess, and I just didn't like it. So, and then for the boost gauge, as you guys know, I do have a NITROUS kit and I'm only running one stage. This plate is available to run 2 stages, and so what I did is I ended up pulling one of the plugs out of the second stage side of the plate, and I inserted a brass nipple and I put the boost gauge feed line on that plate, which is mounted under the throttle body, so it's going to see vacuum and boost, and that's how we're going to feed our boost gauge. So it's got its own separate line, and again, you don't have to do it that way, strictly your preference and however you want to do it, but that's how I did mine. So pretty much guys, we are to the point where I'm going to put the charge pipe, or the last piece of tubing here, the tubing assembly up top, and then that's it. We're going to load up the first J-Green startup tune, and we're going to start this thing, let it idle for a minute and see how it goes. I do want to mention one more thing that I did run into a problem with. It's not really a problem, but it's not in the instructions, and I did want to let you guys know. So the belt that comes with the TorqStorm kit is the right belt, and what I ran into was there was absolutely no way I could get the belt on. It just seemed like it was too short. Even pushing the tensioner all the way loose, I just still could not get the belt on. It was close, but there was just physically no way to get it on. So I actually thought it was the wrong belt. I called up TorqStorm. I said, hey, I can't get the belt on. And what he said, what they ran into is, what you have to do is the 7 bolts that holds the supercharger to the bracket, and then this bolt here, and then the other big bolt right down there. If you loosen them up just a little bit to where there's play in this assembly, this bracket and supercharger assembly, then you will be able to get the belt on. Once the belt is on, it's kind of a 2-person job. You'll need someone to hold the tensioner all the way loose while you tighten up these bolts again. You don't really want to tighten them up with tension on the belt. You want to leave the tensioner loose and then tighten all your bolts up, and then let the tensioner back to the tightening side and just let it sit on the belt, and you're good to go. The belt is the perfect size. It's nice and tight. The tensioner is not bottomed out, so don't think that this belt is too short like I did. I actually went and bought a different belt that was a little longer, and it did fit. It went right on without having to loosen all this stuff. But per TorqStorm, they said I would probably end up running into an issue where the belt would slip. So obviously I didn't want to do that. So I followed the instructions he gave me on the phone, and it worked out just fine. So that might be an issue with you, and I just want to let you know. you know, don't worry, the belt will fit, but you may have to do that. So moving on to the piping setup. So on the bottom of the supercharger, we have a 3-inch 90-degree elbow and 2 clamps with a short piece of straight pipe running to a coupler and then running to another pipe which is going down here to the bottom of the intercooler, and it is actually a straight piece of pipe with a 90-degree bend right here, and then we go into another 90 3-inch coupler, and then that is what feeds all the way to the supercharger. That's the setup I went with. Up top we have another 90-degree 3-inch coupler to on one end a 90-degree bend 3-inch pipe, and then going up here we have another coupler, and when I get the last couple pieces up top here, you'll see how it lays out, but it basically goes from here and then kind of loops over into another 3-inch 90. It's a 3-inch to a 3.5-inch 90 elbow right here, and my blow-off valve is up here also on that pipe, and I'm going to show you that stuff. I'm going to get it bolted up so you see how it looks. Alright, so before I get this installed, and it might be a little hard to see, I wanted to go over a couple other things. So this is the last section of piping to finish the complete intercooler to the intake setup. So that is the other 90-degree bend, and then just goes to a straight, to a coupler, to a straight piece of 3-inch exhaust pipe that I used, and a 90-degree 3-inch on this side and 3.5-inch on this side to go to the throttle body. On the IET sensor, they do supply you with a bung to weld in. However, the bung is an aluminum adapter, and it is meant to be welded to aluminum piping. And that's kind of what I'm going to go over with you real quick. So this intercooler piping that I purchased from Amazon that has a whole bunch of different bends and funky curves and so forth, for like $100, it came with all the couplers, the clamps, and a whole bunch of pipe that I felt like was going to get me through this, and it did. However, this piping, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of cheap. That's why the whole kit's only like $100 and something. So it's kind of thin, and also it's aluminum. I cannot weld aluminum. I do not have the welder here to weld aluminum. I can weld steel all day. So what I did, so that I can attach the blow-off valve, at least for now, and get the truck at least back up and going, is this section is 3-inch exhaust pipe that I got. It's just it was a 12-inch straight piece of 3-inch pipe from O'Reilly's. It was $9. I cut it down to the section that I needed. I drilled a hole in it and put a rubber bushing for my IET. It's super tight. I do not believe this is going to blow out whatsoever, especially on the amount of PSI that we're going to see. But eventually I will get a bung and a threaded IET sensor to thread into this pipe. And then for the blow-off valve, it is sitting up here like this, and what we did is in the TorqStorm kit they supply you with this adapter for the blow-off valve. So what you have to do is, you see how it's kind of got like a mouth on one end, that is shaped to the pipe so that you could weld that down onto your piping, and then you would slide the blow-off valve on top of this and then clamp it down just like this. So, whoops. So again, now this is aluminum, and again, like I said, I don't have the welder for aluminum. I didn't want to take this stuff to a welder and wait for him to get it welded up. So that is why this section is actual exhaust pipe, because I can weld this stuff, and it got me by. And what I did up here for my blow-off valve, obviously I couldn't use this because it's aluminum. This is a 2-inch piece of exhaust piping that I welded to the 3-inch pipe. Basically I made this exact piece, but I made it out of steel or exhaust pipe so that I could weld it to my pipe. So that is going to be your only other challenges if you're going to do this at home, is you will have to do some welding when you get to this point. Again, you can put this blow-off valve anywhere in the system. I chose to put it up here where it can be seen because I want to see the logo, obviously, and this thing is awesome, and there was no sense in hiding it. I want it to be noticeable, and it looks really cool on the truck. But again, when you get to this point, you will have to do some welding. So you can either, use some of the piping that came in that kit and take this and that pipe and go to a welder that can weld aluminum. Mark this where you want it, lay it out on the truck where you want to have it sit. Take a Sharpie, draw around it, and that way when you take this piece of pipe and this adapter to him, he can lay it on there and he can weld it up for you where you want it. Or if you have a TIG welder, or you can weld aluminum, go to town, do it yourself, whatever. But that is what you're going to have to do. You will have to get this part of the system will have to have a little welding done. There's no way really around it. Other thing I want to go over real quick before I get this on and you guys can't see it. So the part where I said I had to cut some of these pipes, well, you're probably thinking, well, what do you do when you cut off the beaded end on the pipe? Because these pipes that came in the kit does have a bead all the way around both ends of the pipe, but obviously if you cut one end off or you cut a pipe and shorten it, you're going to have a bead on one end, but where you cut it, you're not going to have a bead. And obviously when you put a coupler on anything that's boosted, you want some sort of a bead to keep the coupler from trying to slide off the pipe or your coupler blowing off. So obviously I don't have a bead roller, but I'm going to show you how you can make your own bead at home. It might take a little while. Your hand's going to get tired, but if you can tell, it's not the prettiest, but that is a homemade bead on the end of this pipe because I had to cut this section to get the 90-degree bend that I wanted. But there's a nice bead all the way around that will keep a hose coupler on. It's not going to slide off. I don't know if you can see, but there you go. Nice bead, nice and, it's got a good groove right here. It's nice and high, works out great. How you do that? Pair of crimping pliers for for running electrical connectors or whatever. These are snap-on pliers. You can get some cheapies from Harbor Freight. Basically what's going on here is, if you can see, zoom in, you see that little notch right there? When you squeeze it down, it actually pushes that end of the pipe and then presses the pipe into the groove right here and makes a little groove. But you have to do that all the way around the pipe a whole bunch of times, and it does take a little while. Your hand might get wore out after you do a few pipes, but it works. As you can see, it got me through the whole build here and it worked out just fine. And what I'm going to do, so this is a piece of pipe that I had laying around. See, that's the factory bead that comes on these pipes. And then this is the end I cut off to use the other side of this on the build. As you can see, there's no bead because we cut it off. There's a spot where I use those pliers and you can see the bead that I started. I just squished it down about 3 or 4 times. But you can see how it makes a nice little bead and it works great. It just takes a little bit of patience and some hand strength, but eventually you get a nice bead all the way around it, and that is what I did, guys. So this part you can still do at home yourself, not a problem. If you have to cut some piping up and you can't weld it, or you can't weld aluminum, or if you just don't have a welder to obviously cut this piping up, mock it up, and then weld it instead of using a lot of couplers. Again, I'm trying to make this build to the point where anybody can pretty much do it in their driveway or at home by just buying some materials and doing most of this stuff yourself. Like I said, when you get to the blow-off valve and if you do the IET sensor with a bung to screw in, you will have to have some welding done there. There's no way around that. But you can get 95% of this done at home yourself with relatively no tools besides a hacksaw or something to cut piping with and a pair of crimping pliers to apply a new bead on the cut ends that you cut. So just wanted to go over that. So I'm gonna get this thing put on the truck and check it out. All right, so we have the top section installed, and like I said, that is the same section that was on the floor. It consists of 2 pipes. This is a straight piece of pipe that came in the kit. It's actually, well, it was actually a U pipe, and I kept one straight end on it, and then I cut it right here and made a 90. And then, like I said, we did a homemade bead on this end, and then this was the straight inch, or the straight 3-inch pipe up here that I used instead of aluminum piping, so that I could weld my stuff on here and get the blow-off valve on and so forth. So that's how the piping is set up on Frostbite right now. So from the intake manifold, 3.5 inch to 3 inch 90-degree boot, 3-inch piece of exhaust pipe, coupler, 3-inch straight to a 90 to a coupler, and then another straight shot right here with a 90 on the other end into a 90-degree 3-inch coupler to the top of the intercooler. And on the bottom side, another 90-degree 3-inch coupler going into a 90-degree bend right here on this end of the pipe, and then the rest of the pipe is straight to a coupler, and then this is a small section of just straight 3-inch piping to the 90-degree 3-inch boot that is going, or elbow that is going on the bottom of the supercharger. So that is how we piped it up. Now, talking about the coolant reservoir, of course you can't keep it here anyways, so we're going to relocate it. So what I did is I went to Amazon and I got a universal coolant overflow tank that is made out of billet aluminum, whatnot. Nice little piece, very universal, and what we're going to do is we're going to mount it over here on the side of the fender. Inside, we're going to get rid of this old stock intake holder assembly right here. We're going to take these top bolts out. There's 2 bolts on the bottom. We're going to get this gone, and then we're going to mount the new tank right here on the side of on the inside of the fender. And then we will run necessary fittings to attach the hose from the radiator to the new coolant overflow tank right here. This was super cheap. I believe it was under 30 bucks on Amazon, and I'll have the link and everything in the video description. So the last thing I got to do here, guys, is on the top of the blow-off valve, we got to run a hose from here down to the nipple I installed in the intake. Just run a hose right there, which TorqStorm supplied the hose, so we're going to run that hose to there, and then the blow-off valve will be officially hooked up. I have the boost gauge already hooked up, as I showed earlier. So pretty much we're almost done, guys. It's about to get its first start. We just got to get the coolant overflow tank installed over there. I got to upload the J Green tune, and that's it. We are pretty much there. So I'm gonna put the camera on the tripod, and we're gonna get that stock intake holder, airbox holder assembly out of the truck, and we're gonna get that new tank installed real quick. Alright, so before I mess with this tank, we're gonna hook up this blow-off valve. And this will be super quick. This tubing is really nice and tight, so I'm going to install it on the intake side first. I don't think it'll be necessary to run a clamp or anything, but we might run a small zip tie around it or something. Because it'd have to be a really small clamp to clamp on this hose, because it's not very big diameter. And then we're gonna run a piece like, let's say we'll cut it about right there maybe. Alright, so blow off valve is hooked up. And the other thing we got to do is plug in the IET sensor right here. There we go. And now we're going to get these. I already got the bottom bolts out a little while ago. Got to take the last 2 bolts out the top. And I believe those are 13 millimeter. They are. Alright. Got it all loose. Should slide right out. Finagle it around that new supercharger, but there we go. Now we're going to get our new little coolant reservoir, and I'm just going to sit it up here and see how it's going to fit. And it looks like it's going to be about perfect, guys, right there. It sits right there next to the supercharger. Should be pretty good. New reservoir, guys, as you can see on one side and then the other side is more or less the same. This is really universal. You can move these plugs to one side or the other, and all we need is one elbow or nipple to feed our radiator hose, our little overflow tank hose, to plug onto here. And then this little kit they send you with is pretty cool. It's got a bunch of little other fittings in it. And it's got a couple 90s that when I get it done you'll see, but it'll have a 90-degree fitting that comes out of here and goes this way, and the same thing on the bottom goes this way. And then there's actually a clear looking tube that goes in between, so that when this has fluid in it, you can see the fluid level through the clear tube. That way you can keep it, you know, about half full or 3/4 full. But you can always see the coolant level or the fluid in this tank without even having to take the cap off, which is pretty cool. So if it's low, you can top it off or whatnot. So pretty cool setup for the amount of money this thing costs. Alright guys, so we have the coolant reservoir tank set up. We have our out nipple for the hose to go onto. This is the clear line and elbows I was talking about, that you can actually see the fluid inside the box without taking the cap off, so that's pretty neat. And then we have the other side. We're going to plug the other side up, and then we're going to mount it right here like so. So I've already marked the holes. We're going to start drilling. We are actually going to use the factory screws or bolts that came out of the top of the factory airbox holder up here. So I drilled 2 1/4-inch holes, and these are pretty much self-tapping bolts. That's why they got a tapered end on the end. So as long as the hole's a little bit smaller, you run these things in and they will lock in and thread and make their own threads. So that's what we're going to do. Alright, we're going to take our bolt and we're going to thread them in. Make some threads. Lay our tank up here. Grab our other bolt. gonna torque that to about, probably just about 3 motherfuckers, because that don't have to be super tight. Alright, so we have our coolant reservoir box. Overflow tank is installed. Nice little cap. We can see our level through the little straw there, and the factory hose that I cut already once should still be long enough to go. Oh man, look at that. Don't even have to cut it. Perfect. Slides right on there like it meant to go there. We're going to put a little bit of fluid in here real quick. And then we are pretty much ready to start this thing, guys. We're going to get the J Green tune loaded up. And then we still got to put the front grill on. But yeah, other than that, get some fluid in the box, in the tank here, get the tune in, and then we'll probably start it up, let it idle, see what it sounds like, make sure everything's good before we put the grill back on. We got the tune in, we got everything pretty much buttoned up. The grill is not put on yet, but we are ready to start this thing up. I had to charge up the battery because it's been sitting for a while, but whew, I'm ready to hear it. How about you guys? Let's do it. Fire in the hole, baby. Come on, TorqStorm. Holy shit, guys, frostbite sounds ridiculous. Like, woo, man, I am got the biggest goosebumps right now. Like, that is gonna be so sick to drive home tonight. Bam! Ooh. Holy shit. All right, come back to earth. So I don't know how well the video quality did it, guys. The supercharger is really the supercharger is really not that crazy loud when it's idling. I mean, you definitely hear the whining noise, and it's, you know, still brand new. It's still got break in, but it's really not that loud. A Vortex supercharger I had years ago on a Mustang Saline actually sounded a lot louder than that one. So far I'm kind of liking the setup for sure, because it's actually not as loud as I thought it was going to be while it's idling. You definitely hear it, but it's not crazy ridiculous. The blow-off valve, holy shit. I mean, hopefully y'all heard it, but it sounds so freaking good. You stab the throttle, and when that thing lets out the air, good God, it lets everything out, and it sounds just like a turbo popping off. It is absolutely awesome. I cannot wait to get on the road and just drive this thing for a little bit. But guys, man, it's been a journey, but it's really not all that bad to put on. A little bit of time, a little bit of patience, and you can set up and build your own intercooler system for it. That's for sure not that bad. So this is the first startup tune from J Green, and I'm sure, you know, we're gonna need to drive this thing, get some just everyday driving cruising time on it, log that, and then we need to get some wide open throttle pulls and log that, and we're gonna have to probably go back and forth a few times with revisions until we get it completely dialed in. But it's started up, it's idling very good, and I don't see no reason why it's not going to drive home and give us any problems. I think it's going to be pretty good. So heck yeah, guys, I think that's going to do it for the video today. And as always, guys, stay safe out there. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, tap the bell button for the notifications, and we'll see you guys on the next one.